Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Samer and I love R and data analytics. And in today's video, I'd like to present to you RSelenium. RSelenium is a great package that allows you to use Selenium from R. As you may already know, Selenium is an excellent tool for automating web browsers and being able to scrape data in a much more efficient manner than a package like rvest or maybe even Beautiful Soup from Python. So there's a lot of resources for Selenium in terms of Python and Java. There isn't much documentation for R as compared to Python and Java, but there is enough documentation to get you started with using Selenium. So the purpose of this video is to get you set up with Selenium, how to start a server, how to do some basic but fundamental functions like clicking on website elements, extracting text, and using keystrokes to do some commands and run some processes. We're going to deal with a very simple example for today. We're going to be looking at eBay and exploring eBay using Selenium. However, in the future, I do hope to make some more projects, some bigger projects and real case scenarios where you would use RSelenium to work on some big projects. I've used it before and it's such a great tool and I can't wait to dive into it. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. First things first, you will obviously need the RSelenium package. In order to do so, you will need to type in the install packages RSelenium. Just make sure that you have it in quotes. I have already installed this package, so I won't have to do it. So you will go ahead and run that to install your package. But there is one more step that you need to do, and it's that you need to install Java on your machine. Now, there are lots of tutorials that show you how to install Java. I'll go ahead and link in the tutorial that I used to install Java on my computer. It was a pretty straightforward tutorial, got me running in like 5 to 10 minutes, but you will need to install Java because it does rely on Java in order to run Selenium from R. So those are the only two things that you need to do, but after that you can go ahead and load it in. So we're going to load in a couple of packages for today. So I'm just going to load in obviously our favorite package, the tidyverse. I just like to have it because it's a combination of useful packages that are necessary. And then we're going to load in the RSelenium package. And then last but not least, we will load in the Netstat package. Now, of course, you will need to install this. You could use the same syntax, install.packages in quotations Netstat. And what this package is going to do, we're only going to need one small thing from it, and we are just going to need a free port function. This is going to allow us to automatically find a free port for us to run our Selenium server through. So in order to run a Selenium server, you do need to have an access to a free port so that you can run your server through. So you don't have to actually hard code a value or use a default value. This function will just automatically generate a free port for you. And we'll talk more about it when we get to it. All right, so the first step we need to do is to create a Selenium server. We need to start it. So how do we go about doing that? So we need to start the server. So I'm going to go ahead and create a remote server object. So I'm just going to call it RSDriver object, just so that I don't confuse it with the actual function, because there is a function that we're going to be using and it's called RSDriver. This is the function that is going to basically initiate the Selenium server. So we're going to pass in a few arguments into it. First things first, we do want to pass in the browser name. So the browser name, in this case, we want to use Google Chrome. However, you can use Internet Explorer, you can use Phantom.js, you could use Firefox, but I think Chrome works really well with Selenium. So we're just going to go ahead and use that. Next, you want to go into the Chrome version. Now the Chrome version is, you need to actually explicitly mention it because you may have a Chrome version that is older than the latest one. The default value for Chrome version is latest, but sometimes you may not have the latest version. So we can actually get more information about that by just typing in RSDriver, question mark RSDriver, and that's going to give us some more information. And if you go into the Chrome ver, it says that if you run this command binman list versions Chrome ver, what we could do is we could just copy that into the command and paste that. And it's going to give us a list of versions that are applicable for us to use. So in order to check your Chrome version, you just open up a Chrome browser and just type in Chrome // version, and then you're going to see your version at the top. So usually this is the most important part, the first two digits, the 97. Now keep in mind that your numbers may not match exactly with what's on the list, but as long as you can find the one that has the first two numbers the same as yours, then go ahead and use that. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the latest one I find on here. I know there's like 3 of them, but I'll go ahead and use the latest one. I'm just going to copy it and I'm going to paste it into here. I'm going to pass in the verbose argument and set it to false. What this does is it basically just prevents any messages from popping up while starting up the Selenium server. There's a lot of messages that pop up that I'm not really interested in seeing, so I'm just going to set it to false. The default value is true. And then last but not least, I'm going to set the port. I'm going to set the port equal to free port. And remember, this is the function that comes from Netstat. So what this is going to do is it's going to find a free port for you to use and then just run your server through that free port. I believe the default value for the port is 4567L. But this is really cool in the instance that if you're running a separate instance through a specific port, the free port is just going to find a new port for you for your new session of Selenium server. As opposed to if you were just using this right here and you close out of it and you try to run it again, it will give you an error saying that the port is busy and it cannot connect to it, or it's already in connection and you can't create a new server. So this is just a really convenient function. So you can use it or you can leave it out. It's up to you. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And after we run this, you're going to notice that a new session is going to be initiated in a browser, and you're going to notice that Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. That means that we are officially connected to the Selenium server. Now we can close out of this, and don't worry, we will come back and open it again. But here's the thing. In this object, if we look at the class name, so let's go ahead and look at the class of the RS driver object that we have, and it is an RS client server. What this means is that this object has two further objects, or two further things. You have the client and you have the server. Now, in order to be able to access the web browser through Selenium code, you need to access the client side. In order to do that, we're just going to create a client object from the RS driver object that we created. So I'm just going to go and create a client object. And what we're going to do is set the remdr. We're just going to call it remdr. And actually, this is convention in a lot of the documentation, is that they set the client object to remdr. So I like to keep it for consistency's sake. And we are going to access the client object by typing in RS driver object, $, and then access the client. So once we do that, we're going to see in our values that we have the remdr that is now active. Alrighty, now we can get started. So now, in order to open up a session, it's very simple. Now we just need to access the client object to do that from this point onwards. So how do we open up a browser? So very simple. We need to spell that correctly. We type in remdr $, and the $, is going to give you access to all the applicable functions that you can access from the client side. So in order to open a website, it's just as easy as typing in open with some empty parentheses. You run it and it opens up a Chrome session for you. Pretty cool. There's some other functionality you can do in this. So for example, let's say you want to maximize the window size. Of course, you could do that manually, or you could do it through Selenium. So you can do remdr $, max window size. And if we run that and we open up our window size, it's going to be in a maximum window size. So for demonstration purpose, I would like to have the Selenium web browser and our R code displaying simultaneously, just so that you can see the changes. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a split screen for these two. Okay, now let's get started. How do we navigate to a website? So we said that we wanted to navigate to eBay. So it's just as simple as using the navigate function. So let's say navigate to website, and we're just going to type in remdr navigate, and then we just have to type in the URL. So https www.ebay.com. We run it and it loads up fairly quickly. All right. Now let's go ahead and explore some of this web page. I'm going to go ahead and expand this website because we are going to be using the inspect function very heavily. And the inspect function within any browser, it's available. It allows you to see the HTML structure of the website. So we have this eBay website, of course, a lot of different buttons, a search box, lots of things to navigate to. So in order to inspect an element, like let's say we want to click on the electronics section. So we can just right click, type inspect, click on inspect, and then we can click on this little cursor over here and hover over electronics. So what this does is it allows you to investigate the HTML structure. So it allows you to see the A tag, which is the tag that this text represents, and it has the attribute of href, which is basically the link, and then between within the A tag, it shows you the text that is displayed. So in order to click on this item or to really interact with any of the items on Selenium, you really need to find a way to locate those elements. So in order to do so, what we're going to do is we need to go and click on the use the find element function. Finding elements. So in this case, for this case scenario, what we want to do is we want to click on electronics. That's what we want to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to that. So what we need to do is access the client object, $, and type in find element. We just want one element. So this is really cool in the sense that you can specify which method you want to use to find that element. So that could be, you could use, for example, the class name, the ID, you could use the XPath, CSS selector, and we'll be going through some of those methods. But one of the methods that you can use to find an element is through link text. So since it's difficult to just refer to it based on the href, since it's just a long a long URL, and it's bound to be inconsistent, of course, since it's a link. Like let's say you want to click on another link, it's just going to be inconsistent. And it's just much easier to just access it from the text because we know what the text is, and it's electronics. So in order to do that, we could just pass in the using argument and set it equal to link text. And in order to see what is available to you, you can always type in the question mark and type in remote driver. And if you look over here, you can actually go to the find element, and it shows you all the methods of how you can find your elements. So the find element function only takes 2 arguments. It takes the method that you plan to use to find the element and the value of the method that you're trying to use. So if you provide, let's say, for example, the name, then the second argument would be just a string of what that name is. So you have all these methods that you can pick from. So in this case, we are using the link text. That's what we're trying to do. And what we can do is we can set that equal to electronics. Okay. So once we have that, let's go ahead and store it in an object, and let's call it electronics object. And let's go ahead and run that. Okay. So now it's stored. So what we want to do is we want to be able to see, like, okay, has this even registered? So we can actually look at that by, we can even access the attributes of it. So like we could say get element attribute, and let's say we're looking for the href attribute. So if we were to run that, it actually prints out the href attribute that is located within the inspect function right here. But in this case, we're not really interested in that. We're just interested in clicking on it. So the way to do it is actually by using the click element function, which is right here. So I'll put them side by side for you to see that it actually does run. So let me exit out of this and let me run it. So if I were to click on it, click element, and as you can see, it actually went to the electronics section. So now if we want to go back to the previous page, well, we can obviously do it manually, or we could actually do it through Selenium code. And the way to do it is by accessing the client object and using the go back function. And if we were to run that, you can go back, and you can even go forward as well. So we can go forward as well, but we're not interested in going forward. We want to go back to the home page, and there we are. Okay, so now so you get the idea here. You can click on some elements, you can navigate through the web page. Now let's try and search for something. Now, the way to search for stuff on a website using Selenium is to use the send keys function. And how does that work in R? Well, we'll go over that. So we're going to search for an item. So let's say for the sake of this example, we all know that the PlayStation 5 is still very hot. And it's still really hard to get your hands on for a good price. And let's say that I'm interested in looking at the prices and just the availability of PlayStation 5s that are near me. So let's go ahead and access the client object, and let's go ahead and try to do the, we need to identify the search box first. So actually, before we type in the function, let's go ahead and do another inspect, because the inspect function of the web browser is our best friend for Selenium. So let's go ahead and click on it. We click on the search box. And what we can see is that this particular tag type, which is an input tag type, has a lot of attributes that we can refer to. Now, usually if you can get your hands on the ID, that would be great. And in this case, it actually does have an ID value of GH-AC. So we're just going to go ahead and use the ID. So let's go ahead and get started with the writing the function. So we're going to type in remdr, and we're going to use the find element, and then we're going to say using. In this case, we're going to set the using value to ID because we're searching it based on the ID attribute, and the ID attribute value would be GHAC. I believe that's what it was. Yes, it is. And what you can do is then you can actually let's store it in an object called search box, and we're going to go ahead and run it. Okay, once again we ran it. So now how can we send in the keys? So we'll just type in the search box object that we just created, a $, and we're going to type in the send keys to element function. Now, in order to do this, you will need to pass your values within a list. So you're always going to have to start it with a list function, and then you're going to start it off with what keys, or like what text you want to pass in. Now, if you're trying to pass in a key, you can actually do that, and we'll show you how to do that. But for this case, we're trying to search for PlayStation 5. And after this, we want to press enter. We can alternatively just click on the search box, the search button here, but I want to show you how to actually use keys on the keyboard. And all you need to do is just type in a comma right within the list function after the PlayStation 5 argument, and type in key equals to enter. So it's actually just that simple. So I'm going to run them side by side so that you can look at it. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it. So just making sure that the syntax is all correct, and let's go ahead and run that. So it typed in PlayStation 5 and the web page loaded. And I'll go ahead and expand it just so that you can see it. So it loaded up. That is great. Now, one of the things about web pages is that with a web page like this, it's really long. And sometimes with some HTML elements, they don't load up properly if you don't scroll all the way to the bottom. I don't think it's the case for eBay, but I want to show you how you can actually scroll through a web page using Selenium. And this is a really cool way of doing it, which is using JavaScript. So one of the ways that you can execute functions in Selenium is by using the execute script function, which allows you to plug in JavaScript commands to perform some processes that you want it to do. So in this case, the best way to do that, to scroll through the website, is by using JavaScript commands. Now, the cool thing about Selenium is that if you learn something with like Selenium and Python, it's quite easy to actually transfer it to R. So let me show you an example. So I'm trying to find out how to scroll through a document. So I can just go ahead and look through it, and we can say scroll through website using Selenium Python. And you get a Stack Overflow page, pretty standard. Always someone has that question and they look for the answers. And right here in the answers, it says that you can actually use that using the window.scroll function. But if you're trying to scroll through the end of the page, you just need to scroll to the scroll height. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right here. this command, and this is a JavaScript command that is passed within the execute script. And actually it has the same function name, execute script, as well in R. So we're just going to go ahead and scroll through a web page, scroll to the end of the web page. And what we're going to do is we're going to say rmdr and then $ execute script, and we are going to pass in the JavaScript. So what this does is it's going to take the window object, pass in a scroll to function where the starting point is 0. That's the starting point of the window, starting position. And this, it's going to start at 0 and it's going to end at the height of the web page, which is basically the last point in the web page. And then it's just going to run that. Okay. And that's all you would need to do. So let's go ahead and put these side by side. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out of that. So if I were to run this, it's going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Cool. So that is a really cool way of doing that. So we have a lot of items, and we'll get to scraping some of this stuff pretty soon. But what about some of the stuff on the left? Like, what if you want to filter based on a certain region? So let's say I'm just interested in looking at items that are from the United States, or from like China or Japan. How do I go about doing that? Well, of course, inspect is your best friend. You're going to have to right click, inspect, and you want to look at the box here. So you want to click on the box over here, and you want to kind of examine the attributes here. So we're trying to see something that we can identify this box with. And it turns out that the ARIA label might help us. So this is an input tag. So that's the element, the HTML element type is an input tag, and it has an ARIA label attribute equal to United States. I think that's pretty consistent, but how can we go ahead and identify that element? We can't look up an element based on an attribute. Like, we can't say using ARIA label. We only have like ID and class name and CSS selector and XPath. Well, actually, speaking of XPath, we can use that to identify that element. How does the XPath work? Well, let's go ahead and find out. So within the R script, let's go ahead and say, click on the United States filter box. So what we want to do here is we want to obviously access the client object, click on find element, and we want to say using equals to XPath. And the format of XPath is going to look a little bit intimidating or confusing, but I promise it's not as bad. It just takes a little bit of getting used to, and actually there's a really good tutorial on the W3 Schools website, and I'll be happy to link it in the description. That will give you the basics of using XPath. So the syntax is as is. We're going to use 2 slashes, and we are going to put in the tag type. So in this case, our tag type is input. And then what we want to do is we want to pass in the attribute that we're trying to look for. So our attribute is ARIA label, where it's equal to United States. And then we want to close the bracket. So we want to just call this US check box, and we want to store it in there. You don't have to actually store it in a object, but it's really cool to store it in an object because once you run the object, you can actually access the list of functions from the drop down after typing in the $. So I like to tend to store it in an object, but you don't have to. So it's going to look, so the way this works is it's going to look through the document for the input tags only, where the ARIA label attribute of the input tag must be equal to United States. So that's what it does. That's the XPath format. So we're just going to go ahead and run that. And now we have it. So right now we can just go into US checkbox, and just to verify that we have it, we could say, like, get element attribute. And let's say we are looking for the ARIA label. So we can type in ARIA label, and if it prints out the United States. So we don't want to necessarily get the element attribute, but instead we do want to click on it. So of course I am going to close out of it, and I'm going to open it side by side with the R script, and I'm going to have it in here. So it's just going to say click element. And once we run that, it actually clicks on the element. It refreshes the page to only show items in the United States. Pretty cool. So now all we need to do is just simply, if you want to turn it off, you could just run it again. Whoops, it actually says that element is not attached to the document. Okay, that's a little bit strange. We may have to refresh the page. So we could just say US checkbox refresh. And sometimes Selenium does have these little bit of issues. Maybe even scroll through the website, scroll through it. And then let's see if we can find the element. Okay, and then click on the box. Okay, there we go. Now it did it. These are some small issues that you may run into. It could be because the page is not loaded properly, but again, that's one of the things that we need to be mindful of, is just making sure that the web page loads properly. Let's look at one more filter thing. So what I noticed here is that, let's say I'm interested in filtering on color, but the color is, within a drop down. So you have to click on this, and then you have to access these. So how do you click on it? Very simple. You just right click on inspect, and look for the arrow key, the drop arrow key over here. And what this is it's not giving us much information, of course. So what we may need to do is we can alternatively just click on the text. So if we were to just inspect the text over here, what we can see that is it's within a class, it's within the class of x dash refine underscore item, but we can also look this up based on text using XPath. And let me show you how to do that, because XPath, I believe, is a very effective way of locating elements. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and click on the color dropdown. And what we want to do is we want to obviously mention the client object, and then we want to say find element using equals to XPath. And what we want to do is we want to go back to the code, and we want to go back to the inspect, sorry. And we want to look at this, and we want to say, so we're looking within the H3, but we don't have to necessarily, like, if you don't know the tag, that's actually perfectly fine. You could just say, you could say dash dash, and then you could say dot, or I believe is it dot or is it an asterisk? I believe it's an asterisk, if I'm not mistaken. And then you just type in at, or no, in this case, since we're only looking at the text, you only need to type in a text function and set it equal to color. Oops, we want to use double quotes in this case, color, and then we want to close it and open it and open that. So what this is going to do is it's going to find the element using the text color, and then and then we can just do whatever we want with it. So in this case, we can just like maybe click on it. So in this case, we have it right over here. So let's say we want to add another $, click element. Now this is the only disadvantage of not storing this in an object, is you don't get a pop-up with the list of functions, so you kind of have to know it. So if we run this, it actually clicked, as you can see, and it expanded it. So what we can do then is you could just simply click on the button. So again, I believe you could just, like, let's say you want to click on, like, let's say the white console. So you can also look for the ARIA label. So that this would be exactly the same as this code right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it just to save time. And let's say we want to click on the white color. So we're just going to paste it in there, and we are just going to take, we're just going to change the ARIA label to white. And we are just going to type in a $, and click element. Okay, so we're going to run them side by side because I like to show you the process as we run the code. So it's going to go ahead and click on the white, and it's going to refresh the page. We can go ahead and try and click on the element again, and it will unclick off of it basically. So now all of our data is unfiltered just the same way it was. And right now we're just going to go through a little bit more. We're going to go through a mini exercise here. What we want to do is we want to find the average price of PlayStation 5s on this page only. So we obviously need to extract the dollar amount. We have it in here. Now the way to do this is we need to right click and click on inspect, and we want to inspect the dollar amount. So of course it falls within a span tag where the class name is s-item __ price. So that's really cool. So let's go ahead, since we have a class name, we can go ahead and go off of that. And let's say for this case, we could just say we could say identify the price. So then we could say remdr find element using, well, in this case, we're using class. I believe it's class name or even class. I think both work just fine. And then you just include in that class name. So this right here, we're just going to go ahead and call this price. Set it equal to whatever our function is. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it. And then let's go ahead and extract the text. In order to do that, just type in the $sign and type in get element text. So we're going to have to tab right there. And if we were to run this, now this is great. It gets us the element text, but this is a problem because it only gets us the first row. What if we want all the prices? Well, that's when we have to use the find elements function. So when we use the find elements function, let's go ahead and change it to prices. It's going to go ahead and find all of the elements that have a class name of this right here. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Now, and let's go ahead and see if we can extract the text for all of them. So if we were to run this, we get an error. That's because the prices is now stored in a list. And if we try to look at the look at the length of the prices, so let's see length of prices, we look at it and we have a total of 67 prices. So how do we go about, since it's in a list, how do we go about extracting the text? This is where we're going to have to use an lapply function. An lapply function is very simple. All we need to do is just simply we need to just pass in a list, and then we need to pass in a function. And the function is basically going to perform some type of action on each of the elements of the list. So we're going to go ahead and create a new object and call it price values. And this is going to be basically the numbers. And we're going to set it equal to lapply. And for lapply, we're going to take the list and function. So our list in this case is the prices. And then the function, we're going to set it equal to function x. And we're going to set it equal to x dot, or we don't need the curly brackets, I don't believe, but x $sign get element text. And that should give us the element text. So what this does is basically saying for each item in the prices, get me the element text for each of them. And x acts as a placeholder for the an element of the list. So the lapply function is in place so that you just avoid using loops. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot more efficient, and you could just do it in one line of code, as you can see. So let's just go ahead and run the output without storing it in an object first. So we're going to run this, and obviously it gives us all the prices, but it's in a little bit of a messy format. So what we need to do is we need to unlist it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run that, and we're going to take a look at it. And as you can see, that's a lot neater. Now, of course, we have a little bit of a discrepancy in here with value number 33. So what we're going to do is we're just going to simply drop it when we have the chance to. One of the things here, though, is that we have a little bit of an issue where if we wanted to perform some type of calculation, we have a dollar value in here. We can't necessarily perform a calculation with a dollar value in here, so we do need to remove that. So in order to do that, we're going to use a little bit of regular expressions. We're going to use the str remove all, which is a function from the string R package, and we are going to basically just remove any instance with a $sign. So if we were to run that, it's going to go ahead and do that for us. So that's going to go ahead. So if we were to run all of that and store it in the price values, so now if we were to look at the price values, we could see that the price values has all of the values. Now we just want to go ahead and drop that value. We're not interested in having a range in this case, so we're going to say price values equals to price values, where the value is not equal to index. I believe this is 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, so this is index number 33. So the value that is not equal to 33, we're going to go ahead and run that. Price values. And if we were to look at that, we now have the values. And what we could do here is now we want to convert this into a number because now it's still strings. So we could just say convert from number to string. And we would have been able to apply this step in over here when we were doing the piping. But because we had that value that wasn't really a number, it had the 2, it was a range, we wanted to get rid of it. So price values would be equal to price values as numeric. So if we were to run that, we can then look at the price values and we will get the price values in number. So we could do something cool. Like for example, we could look at the average price of the PlayStation 5s on the first page of eBay. So if you look at the mean price, it's $740, which is of course a lot higher than the retail price, which is no surprise. We've been seeing that trend for a lot with the PlayStation 5s, but it's pretty insightful to get this. We can even we can look at a median, we could look at the price values, and we could see that actually the median is pretty close to the mean. So it is pretty pricey. But yeah, we were able to make some calculations based on scraped data using Selenium. So that's really cool. So, you know, these are a lot of the basics of just basically clicking on items, scraping some text, sending some keys through a search box, navigating through a web page. These are a lot of the basics of Selenium. Now, of course, when you're done with your work, you'd obviously want to close your server. And the best way to close your server is by simply terminating the Java task. Now, in order to do that, you will need the system function, and the system function in R will allow you to execute OS commands. So we're going to go ahead and type in, you know, just terminate the Selenium server. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in the system function, and we're going to have to pass in some OS commands. So this is what you would typically type in into the command prompt. So we're going to type in task kill, which is going to kill the task. And then we're going to type in a /im java.exe, and I'll explain the syntax shortly, F. And that's all you would need to type in really to get this done. So what this means is it says, okay, kill the task, and im, the /im basically means this is the image that I want you to perform the action on, which is task kill. And basically they want to perform the task kill function on the java.exe. Since Selenium is running on the java.exe, so that's what we want to kill. And the F basically means force it to stop. So if we were to run this, the process java.exe is not found. So there might be something wrong with my syntax over here. Let me refer back to my task kill. Did I misspell something? Oh. Let me see if this is going to do it. Stops all processes. Let me see this. So it should be the same. Oh, there we go. Okay, there, I probably had a small misspell. Oh, so you have to use double quotes. That's what it is. Okay, sorry about that. So you do need to use double quotes to kill the task, and you're going to be met with some messages saying that the process has been terminated. I believe I had more than one Selenium session running, which is why it shows 2, but regardless, if you do see a 0 and says success, then that means it's been successfully closed. So that's the best way to close a Selenium server. You're done, and then if you ever want to start over again, you can load in your packages and start over again just this way. So this was just a very brief introduction to RSelenium. What I hope to do in the future is to create some more projects using RSelenium so that you can see how applicable it is. And also I want to be able to provide more resources for RSelenium. It's a great tool. It definitely deserves a lot more resources out there for you to use. And you know, if you're an R person, just like me, you would much prefer to do all of this in R, a language that you're familiar in. So I just want to show that this is possible for you to do. I hope you enjoyed this video. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment on this video and I'll be happy to get back to you. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll have my LinkedIn in the description. I'd love to continue the chat. And if you have any suggestions for future content, I'm all ears. Thank you so much for tuning into my first video, and I hope to make plenty more. Thank you so much and take care.